In the last 2 years of being a student in the best university in my country and one of the best universities in the world, University of Toronto, I've learned exactly how to get better grades while studying as little as possible. And so if you watch until the end of this video, you're going to learn exactly how to become an efficient student while also getting the same grades, if not better grades at the same time. And we're going to do this just by going through my tactics that I use for each different task that you might have to do as a student. And so if you can think about the different tasks that each student might have to do, the first thing is probably just reading the assigned textbook readings. Another thing is going to lectures and then taking notes after on the lecture slides. Another thing is probably doing a lot of assignments. And then you're also most probably going to have to study for the test, and this is the hardest task that a student has to do. So I'm basically going to summarize exactly how I approach each of these tasks so that you spend as little time as you need to get the good grades that you want. And so for reading the textbook, this depends for each class because some classes test a lot more on textbook information and some don't really do it at all and only focus on the lecture content. And so either way, I try to read the textbook regardless. And so let's say I'm doing it for a course that doesn't really focus on the textbook as much, then all I'm going to do is just read the summary section of each chapter that we're doing this week. And so if we're doing chapter 21 this week, all I'm going to do is go on the Sunday. I do all my textbook readings on a Sunday and give myself like 2 to 3 hours of just finishing all my readings that I have to do for the week. And that way I don't have to worry about missing a reading. And it's like I have to wake up on a Wednesday morning and read my textbook just before my lecture. Instead, you just save time by doing it all at once on Sunday or on the weekend, just before the week starts, so that you just get it out of the way. And so for the courses that don't focus as much on the textbook, you just read the summary section. That way you get a bit of background information before you go into the lecture, and it helps with your memory retention. Another thing you can do is just write a couple brief notes after you've read the summary section. And you want to do this using active recall. So basically you read the section, the summary, and then you write notes based on what you can remember of what you just read. It's not like I'm writing notes and just staring at the textbook, because that way I'm not recalling anything. But if you want to go the extra step with reading the textbook for courses that, for example, focus a lot more on the textbook, then you might want to actually read the whole chapter. And the method that you want to use for reading the textbook is called the SQ3R method. So the SQ3R method basically consists of 5 things that you need to do when you read. And so the first thing you want to do is survey. And what it means by survey is that you just quickly skim over the reading you're about to do. And the way I recommend this is going by section. You know how in your chapter you have like different sections, like you have like 21.1, 21.2, and on and on. And so you want to basically read section by section, where it's like you're not really reading more than 2 pages at a time, because that way you're not going to remember much anyways. But if you read section by section, right, the first thing you want to do is survey. And so you skim over the reading, just quickly look over like highlighted words, just the general main topic of the reading so that you know what you're about to read. The second thing you want to do is question. So SQ, right, you want to question. And so you basically want to create a question that you can answer using the main information in the section you're about to read. And so let's say the section you're about to read is like, it talks about like what causes psychological disorders, right? So then your question for that section should be, what causes psychological disorders, ? And you write that down on your iPad or whatever you're taking notes on. You write that down as your section question. Like you write down the question as your title, because later you're going to use active recall to actually answer that question. And so SQ3R. So now we move on. After you question, then you read, and then after you read, you recite. And so recite is basically the same thing as recall. And so once you've read the section, you go back to your note-taking or notebook, right? And you basically answer the question you just created. And so your question was, what causes psychological disorders? Now you've read it, and now without looking at the textbook, you use your active recall and trying to remember what you just read to answer the question. And then after you've written everything you can remember, then you review. And that's the last step. And so you review, basically see what do you have missing from your answer that was mentioned in the textbook, and then you add it on. And especially if you add it on using a different color, that way you can recognize exactly what you did not recall. Using this method is going to actually genuinely increase your information retention, and your memory is definitely going to increase just from reading the textbook this way. And so therefore, when you go into the lecture, you've already have had so much background information that learning the material in the lecture is going to be a lot easier. And so just using the SQ3R method, the survey, question, read, recite, review method, generally game changer when it comes to reading the textbook. But this is something that you might not need to do for every single course, because it can get really time consuming. And so if you don't need to do this method, you don't need to learn that much about the textbook for a certain course, then you might just want to read the summary of each chapter, and that takes 10 minutes instead of 1 hour. So you've read your textbook, and now you're going to go to the lecture. First thing I recommend is you probably need to go to the lecture for most of your classes. There are some classes where I agree the lecture slides literally cover everything that the professor is about to say anyways. And so if your professor doesn't add anything extra, doesn't add any extra substance to the information you need to know, then you might want to stay home. Especially if there are lecture recordings, you could generally just watch on 2x speed and get 99% of the learning experience that you were going to get in the lecture anyways. But let's say you go to the lecture, right? I don't want you to take so many notes in the lecture. I want you to have the lecture slides open so that you're not writing everything word for word. And I want you to write as little as information as possible so that you actually focus on the words and what is being said. And so what I want you to do is take a few notes and really focus on the information that's actually being taught. And then I want you to go home and either the same night of the day you had the lecture or right the next morning, that's exactly when I want you to take notes on the lecture that you had. And I want you to also do this using active recall. So basically, let's say today I had a lecture, then either tonight or even most probably tomorrow morning is probably fine either. I'll wake up and I'll get out my iPad and I'll open a blank document, not even the lecture slides, and I'll try to do active recall. Like I'll open each slide and then look at the title of the slide, right? Quickly glance at it and I'm like, okay, what do I remember that she said about this, or he or she said about the slide? And you write it down, and then again you review. You see what you had missing, you write it in a different color. That way you recognize what information do you easily recall and what information do you have difficulty recalling. And just that textbook and lecture method, it's going to make it so easy for you to remember information so that when it comes to studying for the test, you don't need to put that much effort in comparison to, let's say you just started studying for the test but you have like no clue what you're doing. You went to the lecture but you didn't really try, you didn't read the textbook. Like, this is a game changer, and it's going to make your test studying half the time and a lot easier. And so then the next task that we're going to focus on is just your assignments. And since this can vary a lot, I can't really go into too much specification, but one thing that I've noticed that I do for most of my assignments that make my assignments take as little time as possible is I first of all use AI. And so even though it sounds bad, none of my actual final draft consists of like genuinely AI doing all my work. What I use AI for is that it just takes away all the mundane tasks away. And so let's say I have to do a research article or something, or I have to answer some questions, right? Why can't I use AI to make me a rough draft? Let's say I just paste the assignment instructions and I tell it exactly this is what I require on the assignment. Let's say I need an introduction and a methods thing and then discussion. So I basically just to make me a rough draft, so that all I have to do now is look at each section, and then the AI will tell me exactly what I need to cover in each section. And so it tells me, you need to talk about this, you need to talk about this, you need to talk about this. So all I have to do now is just type it in, but I don't have to think that much. It's like I already know what I have to write. I just have to like figure out the words that I'm going to use. Using AI for this step generally saves me 1 to 2 hours per assignment. And so now we're going to cover exactly how to study for exams, and this is probably the hardest thing that students struggle with. And the reason why they struggle with this is because they don't do the work that's prior. They don't read the textbook and use active recall, and then they don't go to the lecture and then write notes on the lecture right after, and also using active recall. And so let's say you did those steps. First of all, this should be easy, but also the way you study for the test really matters on how well prepared you are for the exam. So when it came to exams, I always used to, first of all, study like starting 2 days before or even one day before the exam and just pull an all-nighter. And the second thing is I would focus so much on just repeating and reading the notes like 10 times and just reading it off the page or off the slide and just hoping that I would remember. And this would not always work. I'd always just get lucky that I just remembered the stuff that I needed to know for the test. But a lot of the times I just wouldn't remember the information that I needed to know. And this is because just reading words off a page is not going to do you any favors. What you want to do is focus a lot more on just doing practice exams. You want to do exams for that same class, by that same professor or a similar professor, because you're going to get similar questions, right? If you already know what type of questions they like to ask on the exams, then you're well prepared, because even if you don't get the same exact question with the same exact numbers, you're going to get a very similar question with a very similar format. But a lot of the times, the same exact questions do repeat word for word. So all you have to know is, oh, when I did that question 2 days ago when I was practicing, what did I answer? All you have to do is just copy and paste and you're good. So what I want you to do is, first of all, start studying at least 5 days before the exam. I'd recommend even 7 days if you haven't done the lecture and the textbook steps. But if you've done those, generally 5 days is more than enough, and all you need to do is 1 hour a day. See, that's so much less time than the people who spend 10 hours the night before and just like sacrifice their sleep and then therefore also get worse grades. But if you study in a smart way, just put 5 days before the exam and do 1 hour each day. That's 5 hours for studying for a test. That sounds insane, but just by putting the work prior into the lecture and the textbook, that also counts as test studying, right? But the way I want to actually split it is 80-20. 20% reading the notes and trying to just remember what you were studying, and 80% practice. 80% practice. It sounds insane, but I want you to put, so let's say you're doing 5 hours of studying, I need to put 1 hour into just reading the notes. And if you've had good notes that you did after your lecture and you summarize the important information, even perfect, makes it even faster. And then I want you to spend 4 out of the 5 hours just doing practice exams. Just find exams that the course has had, like, last year, any year before, or any practice questions that your professor gives you usually are good enough. But do every single test that you can find for that course and just repeat it. Any question that you get wrong, keep repeating it until not only you get the right question, but you understand what it's asking and why you got it wrong. This method has helped me consistently get good grades. Obviously, that still makes me prone to getting a bad grade here and there, but more than 90% of my exams go well because I just follow a similar structure to this. Even though I'm not fully disciplined all the time, if you just follow, even if you follow this ideal to even 70%, 60%, 80%, bro, you're definitely going to see a change in your grades. And so if you want to learn how to get good grades and how to become a productive student, then just check out my course. It's the first link in the description, and I'll see you there.